Hello, welcome to the first lecture for EDFG C506. And this week we're looking, which is the policy and practice of education, and this week we're looking at a particular policy in respect to the Asia literacy policy. And we're introducing the concept of educational policy and how that then trickles down into what we actually do as teachers. So the focus of this lecture is to examine some examples of this, or a range of policy issues and dilemmas for educators, with a specific focus of a context of local, national and global context. And in particular we're going to look at, as I said, the Asia literacy policy, which fits in with all these areas, all these contexts. And your success criteria is to articulate an understanding of this complex nature of reasons behind aims and driving forces and how that then influences the implementation as it trickles down into the local context. So how does then educational policy relate to you as a pre-service teacher, and the dilemmas that you might face in relation to it? Well, policy overall, whether it's on a national level or at a state or local level, determine so many things that we do. It determines what we teach, so the content. It determines assessment and reporting requirements, again, whether they be on a national level, which I'm going to talk about in a minute, or if it's at a school level in respect to how a report to parents actually looks and what it consists of. And obviously that in turn is connected to the curriculum content because you're reporting on something. Policy also determines the professional approach that you take in respect to how you communicate with students and about students to parents and to colleagues. It determines the decisions that you make about being inclusive and selecting activities for your students so that you unpack the curriculum content, which again fits in with the wider agendas, if you like, of policy directions. And it determines, sorry about that noise, it determines the relationships you have with colleagues, with parents and the wider school community. All this fits in, again, to a world, if you like, of the big picture of certain aims and aspirations, if you like, for a country. So educational policy is extremely important. And it represents the rationale, the reason or the directions for rules and implementations that are strategically made and implemented given a wider direction of a country, in this case Australia. It's constructed based on research and reports and recommendations. It's not just emerging in a vacuum, it's there for a reason, and we're going to look at some examples of that, so keep this in mind. It is a governance document, so it's signed off by the appropriate governing bodies, whether it's the Department of Education or whether it's a school, whether it's the federal government, but it does steer the direction, and so it's not just articulating a goal that has been addressed or highlighted by research or reports. It's an accountability document, if you like, because it determines how we go about things. Policy in Victorian schools are the responsibility of school councils, but the implementation of policy is often the responsibility of teachers within the school, which is, again, how this complexity of a range of contexts are quite apparent. And because we live in a changing world and schools change, obviously policy should be reviewed regularly because it gets dated and we need to scrutinise because we have different needs as well as society changes. Policies are often derived from issues that arise from another level. So one example is the standards testing, which has then translated into NAPLAN testing in Australia. If we look at the UK, which had quite a highly developed, if you like, testing system, huge summative assessments, ranking between schools and so on and so forth, with the aim of improving schools, because both research and various reports suggested that this was a good way of going about it. Well, that then influenced how NAPLAN came to be implemented in Australia, which is written into both federal and state policies and applied to schools at a local level. And the NAPLAN results are just one indicator, but they're used to rank schools by achievement. They also, there as an indicator of, if we look at the My School website, which displays both the NAPLAN results and give an indication of socioeconomic status. It's used to allocate funding for high needs demographics, and it touches on policy of equity and social justice as well. And a lot of people, researchers as well as private mums and dads, have some very strong opinions about this, but nevertheless it fits into a wider perspective. Another example is the concern of declining student results in international testing. So this is another testing example. If we look at the PISA, the Programme of International School Assessment, which is done by the OECD, so Western countries in particular have been the focus. It's in essence like a league table. We see it on the news headlines, Australian student results, or Australian 15-year-olds are not as strong as the ones in Shanghai or something like that. So there's a big debate about all these comparisons that goes on, and particularly kind of pops up when the PISA results are revealed, because it's an indication of how Australia as a whole is travelling, or it's read that way. So these results, the declining students in international testing for 15-year-olds, has then resulted in reviews of, for example, pre-service teacher training in Australia, amongst other nations. That in turn has then resulted in findings like the TMAG report, which is, I forget what the acronym stands for, it's a teacher education ministerial something report. And that has then been used to formulate new policies regarding the quality and the nature of pre-service teacher courses in Australia, which shapes exactly what we do here at Fed Uni, for example. So it has national, state and local implications for all stakeholders, which are derived from a need or a perceived need that's been scrutinised, and then governments implement changes to address this. So we're going to have a look at the case study of the Asia literacy policy and look at some of the documents associated with this and how it kind of sprung up in the first place. And just like so many of our education policies, including our national curriculum, the Melbourne Declaration of Educational Goals for Young Australians from the Ministerial Council meeting in 2008 found or stated that a global integration and international mobility have increased rapidly in the past decade. As a consequence, new and exciting opportunities for Australians are emerging. India, China and other Asian nations are growing, and their influence in the world is increasing. Australians need to become Asia literate, engaging and build strong relationships with Asia. So from this Melbourne Declaration, which articulated an aim, if you like, or a direction, a whole host of implementations and other reports and findings have been generated. One of the papers that was generated was the white paper then on Australia in the Asian century, which has the central argument that the teaching and learning of Asian languages and studies are national objectives that are integral to national productivity. So it's very much a financial argument. That actually is a common occurrence. We find that in everything. Same with PISA results. That's ultimately underpinned by financial incentives and human capital in the Western world. I mean, it's even developed by the Organisation for Economic Collaboration or Cooperation. From this, the Asia Education Foundation emerged, and their National Statement of Asia Literacy in Australian Schools identified some broad knowledge, skills and understandings that all schools should make sure that their students achieve in respect to Asia literacy. And there are three broad areas under which Asia literate students require knowledge, skills and understandings. And it's grouped into Asia and its diversity, achievements and contributions of the peoples of Asia, and Asian-Australian engagement. So very much ideas that are there to help young Australians make connections with Asia for economic purposes, and also in respect to where we're located in the region and identity and so on. Now, these six interlinked areas are to be addressed through schools in the form of the Australian curriculum, where there's an Asian theme or a cross-curricular priority. Also, Asia literate school leaders that have work and that shapes how the school goes about it. Asia literate teachers, so that has PD implications, for example. Asia focused classroom resources, which obviously we use partly as we teach and address this need and this policy agenda. Asian language and education programs like Lect, which are Asian languages rather than doing French or German, often Asian languages at schools, that all fits into this policy agenda, and then increased student, parent and community demand for Asia literacy. And this is something that, I mean, there are a number of reasons. Let's face it, Australia is a multicultural society, and it makes sense that we make these connections given where we are in the region, given the population, which has got quite a large proportion of its population deriving from Asian countries. So I guess it's a reflection of society as well as priorities from the federal government. So Asia Literacy and the Australian Teaching Workforce then commissioned a report, or rather the Asia Education Foundation commissioned a report. And this was written by Deakin University, and you've got the link there. I will put it up on Moodle as well, because you actually need to have a look at that. That's one of your readings for this week. And this report promotes the need to improve teacher understandings and knowledge through wide range of experimental, educational and supportive strategies. And one of the recommendations is that Asia literacy for teachers is to be linked to the national standards, so the AITSL standards for teachers. Now, I want you to kind of connect back to that success criteria and have this little checkpoint. So check yourself. Are you able to articulate an understanding of some of this multifaceted and complex nature of educational policy? Are you able to name some of the driving forces behind the Asia literacy policy? What actually underpin this? And what are some of the examples of the policy that has then been implemented in the local context? And that's what you're going to be doing next. I'll put the task up on Moodle as well, but I'll talk you through it here. I want you to view this video clip, which are examples of how schools develop their students' Asia literacy skills and knowledge. And I want you to go hunting. This is where your local context comes in. I want you to find evidence from sources. It could be strategic plans, it can be school websites, it can be newsletters to parents, newspaper reports of how your local school actually connects with the idea of Asia literacy. Can you find any evidence of it? And how does that evidence compare with the Deakin report that you're supposed to read this week? I want you to write a brief post about your thoughts on how this fits in. Include a link or a photo of the sources that you're referring to and put that on this week's forum. Okay, thank you.